Welcome back. Now let us look at our first concept for this lesson, which is ecology. Ecology is the study of the interaction between organisms and also between living organisms and their physical environment. So that is what ecology is. It is a study that focuses on the interaction. If you remember from the new words that we learned, is that interaction speaks about the communication, the direct context that organisms have with one another. So the ecology is a study that looks at those interactions between organisms and also between organisms and their environment. The environment then is a specific surrounding such as a home, a school, a river, and more, where there are living organisms that interact with one another. So wherever there are organisms that are alive and they are interacting with one another, then we call that an environment. So now, each of these environments has different ecosystems. And if you remember, we said that an ecosystem is made up of different populations that are interdependent on one another. So the ecosystem is made up of living parts and non-living parts of the environment. The living parts of the environment or of an ecosystem includes animals, plants, bacteria, protista, and fungi. So these are the things that can undergo life processes, hence they are living. And then here's an example, a picture of living organisms. We can see that we have plants, which is the trees over here. We have our giraffes, the snake and the baboon, and the grass. So these are our living organisms that form the ecosystem. Now moving on to the non-living things or the non-living parts of the ecosystem, of the environment rather. So here we are looking at light, air, water, temperature, and the soil, of course, including rocks. So here's a nice picture that further explains, that further shows the examples that we've just listed here. We have temperature, we have light, we have water. So those are the non-living parts of the ecosystem. So living organisms interact with one another and their environment in order to stay alive. Obviously, a living organism needs another living organism so that it survives. Because if you remember from previous lessons, we've spoken about the fact that some animals feed on other animals in order for them to survive, right? And in order for the feeding process to happen, obviously they need the environment. So we need the soil, we need the air to breathe. So those are the non-living parts of the environment that these animals need in order to stay alive. So for example, organisms depend on other organisms for food, animals eating animals, and also their environment for various activities to ensure their survival, like breathing in the air, like water, so that we don't get dehydrated. So here's a nice picture that shows an animal that has just fed on another animal. As you can see, this lion has blood. So it tells us that it has just eaten another animal. So this is done so that it survives, to ensure survival. We have another example where we have our bird and water. Obviously, we need water to drink. And sometimes we find these small animals that we find in water that birds feed on. Again, we need the environment so that this bird survives. We have 4 levels of ecological interactions. These are populations, communities, ecosystems, and the biosphere. So we have 4 of them. Now, if you look at the diagram here, we first start off with one organism, as you can see here. And then from the organism, we are moving on to the population. Now, if you look at the population, it is the same type of species that is in the same area, and it is able to breed with one another. How do we know that? Because we can see that we've got adults, impalas, and we have a baby over here. So this tells us that they are able to breed and make more of themselves. And they are found in the same environment. If you remember from our definition, we said that a population is the same species that is found in the same area and is able to interbreed. So the second one is a population. Now we said that a population is made up of a variety of species that are living in the same environment. So as you can see in this picture, we have zebras, we have the impala, we also have lions under the tree there. So these are different types of species. So these are different populations, but they are found in the same area and they are interdependent on one another. Obviously, the lions are going to feed on the zebras or the impalas. Obviously, the vulture on the tree is going to feed on the dead meat of whatever animals that the lions are going to kill. So this tells us that these animals depend on one another for survival. So that situation is what we refer to as a community. Now, if we move on to the next one, we have an ecosystem. So an ecosystem here, we still have communities of different animals, but this time we have plants as well. Can you see there's a population of trees over there? We have animals over here, and we have something that we did not have in the previous pictures. We have the atmosphere, we have the sun, we have water. So these are the non-living parts of the ecosystem. So here we have organisms that are interdependent on one another and also dependent on their environment. So that is the ecosystem. So we are going to look at each of these ones in detail, starting with the population. So we're going to leave it here for now, and I'll see you after the ad break. Welcome back. So we are looking at the first ecological interaction level, which is population. So on the picture that you can see alongside here is a population of pine trees. So if you remember from our definition, we said that a population are organisms of the same species that are found in the same area and are able to breed with one another. So as you can see here, we have the same type of tree in this forest. So that is an example of a population. And I know that a population is normally, or the word population is normally associated with human beings in most cases, but you need to be aware of the fact that it also includes plants. So that is why I actually used trees and not human beings this time. A population is a group of organisms of the same species. As you can see on the picture, this is the very same tree that live in the same area. We are finding it in one area at a specific point in time, and they can breed. So the fact that there's more than one, that's an indication that they are able to breed with one another. When scientists study a population, they might study how the population grows and factors that affect how the population grows or decrease. So basically, when they try and find out what is it that causes the decrease or the increase on a population, that's exactly what they do. They look at the things that affected or the influences around that certain population. They will also look at how the population interacts with its environment. Now, you can also see another example of a population. This is now a population of zebras found in the same area. We know they are interbreeding because, they are breeding rather, not interbreeding. They are breeding with one another because we can see there's more than one, which means reproduction is taking place. Now, we are going to move on to the second level of ecological interaction, which is community. In ecology, a community is composed of populations of different species that share a common area and are interdependent on each other. So those are the things that we normally look out for whenever we are speaking about a community. We are looking at the fact that it's populations of different species. We are also looking at the fact that they coexist in a common area, and also the fact that they are interdependent on one another. Now let us look at the picture alongside. So if you are looking at this picture, you will see that we have giraffes here. We also have an elephant, we also have a lion, we have meerkats here. So what I'm trying to show you here is that we have different species or different organisms from various species. So this tells us that there are different populations that are coexisting in a common area. So that basically tells us that we have different types of species. These different types of species are found in a common area, and on top of that, they are interdependent. Now, what do we mean by interdependent? We mean that they feed on one another for energy. So, for instance, if this lion feeds on the meerkat or on the impala over there, so basically what will happen is that the lion will get the energy from whatever it's going to be feeding on. So that means the lion is interdependent or is dependent on the next organism for its survival. So that is a community. A variety of populations that are found in the same area, and they are interdependent on each other. For example, in the community alongside, you will find a population of giraffes. We've already spoken about that. You will find a population of lions. We have already spoken about it, even though it doesn't show a population in this picture, because obviously you are seeing one lion. But if there's one lion, it means there's more. If there's one giraffe, that means there's more. So you can see that there's a population of lions. We see a population of rabbits in the picture. So these are different species. These are different organisms, but they are found in one place, and they depend on one another for survival. So this is just a quick reminder that a population looks at the same species, whereas a community looks at different species. Now we are going to look at energy flow. So how does the energy flow? In the previous slide, I mentioned that the lion is going to get energy from eating a certain organism. So now we are going to look at how the energy moves from one organism to the next. So energy flows from the sun to different organisms to support and sustain life. Obviously, we need energy in order for us to be alive and to continue to live. So now that energy that we need comes from the sun. Plants use energy from sunlight during the process of photosynthesis to make food. And this food is containing what? Energy. Now, animals eat this food so that they can get energy. Herbivores get energy directly from the plants, but carnivores and omnivores eat animals for energy. Now, a herbivore is an animal that feeds only on plants or that eats only plants, whereas a carnivore eats another animal, and an omnivore eats both plants and animals. So now we are saying that herbivores get the energy directly from the plants because they only eat plants, whereas carnivores and omnivores eat other animals in order for them to receive this energy. Now, there are two ways in which energy is transferred. The first one is through a food chain. A food chain is used to show the transfer of energy from one organism to another organism. Let us look at this picture. So here we have a nice example. We have producers. If you remember, producers are green plants or plants that are able to make their own food. So we have this plant or these green plants being eaten by the grasshopper. So the producers or the plants are being eaten by the grasshopper. So the energy moved from the grass to the grasshopper. From there, the grasshopper is eaten by the frog over here. So the energy moved from the grasshopper to the frog. And then the frog is eaten by the snake by the hawk, and the hawk dies and then decomposes and is fed on by the fungi. So basically what I'm trying to show you here is that the energy moving from the producers throughout the food chain is done by the organism eating the other organism eating the other organism. So that is how a food chain works. It shows the transfer of energy from one organism to the next. Now we are going to look at the next method of energy transfer. Just going to quickly erase here because it's going to disturb our next picture. Right, so a food web, therefore, is used to show the many different feeding relationships between different species within an ecosystem. So what does that mean? Let us look at this picture. For example, we are going to look at the seaweed over here. This seaweed is eaten by the crab. The crab is eaten by the squid. The squid is eaten by the elephant seal and also the penguin. So now one organism is eaten by two organisms. Then from there, we have the penguin being eaten by the killer whale, while the very same penguin being eaten by a leopard seal. So now this very penguin is being eaten by different organisms. So a food web basically looks at different types of food chains that are put together or that are interlinked. It shows, the difference between the two is that a food chain shows the energy transfer from one organism to the next, whereas a food web shows the energy transfer from one food chain to the next. Just a quick reminder, food chains is energy is transferred from one organism to the next, which I've already explained, and a food web speaks to energy that is being transferred from one food chain to the next. So we are going to stop there for now, and I'll see you after the ad break.